Good morning and good evening wherever you are. This is Ellie from USC. Welcome to the series of USC graduate program event, which will help you to learn cutting-edge knowledge in different academic areas and inspire you to think beyond. This webinar is the 149th USC event, and today's topic is Preparing for Retirement, Gerontological Approaches. Today, we are honored to have three guest speakers from USC Leonard School of Gerontology to share a wonderful webinar with you. Let me introduce them. Our main guest is Dr. Deborah Huiyuan Hu, who is an instructional assistant professor of gerontology. Welcome so much, Dr. Deborah. And we are also delighted to have our another two important guest speakers, May Ng and Stephen Stump. May is the Director of International Student Initiatives and the Director of Information Technology. Stephen is the Admission Counselor. Welcome, May and Stephen. It's so nice to see you. And before starting the main part of our webinar, dear audience, please note that we will have around 15 minutes Q&A section after the speech. We will try our best to get as many questions as we can, not only from the Zoom chat box, but also from our live streaming platforms. So please feel free to leave your questions into the chat box at any time. And kindly remind to our Zoom audience, this webinar will be recorded for the future use. So please mute yourself during the presentation for the good webinar quality. Thank you so much for your support and understanding. Okay, let's start our session. I will pass it over to May first. Welcome, May.
嗨，大家早上好，欢迎你们今天来参加这个讲座。我的英文名字叫 May Ng， 中文名字叫胡燕美。我是南加州大学老年学院的国际交流和资讯科技总监。USC 呢，是位于南加州洛杉矶市中心的。南加大在美国的排名很高的。我们大学有20多个学院。我们老年学院就是其中第一个 Leonard School 老年学院是全球第一所专门研究老年科学的学院。我们是世界排名第一位的老年学院。我们的学院在1975年创立，规模非常之大，已经有差不多50多年的历史了。原来有师资雄厚，有来自老年医学啦、心理学啦、社会学、人口统计学、营养学、商业管理学、生物学等等多种领域的专家学者。南加大是美国拥有最多中国留学生的大学。南加大今年的国际学生有14000多个，来自不同140多个国家。等于为我们的教授和教授为在校了解用老年科学的方法为养老做好准备。你们等有什么问题可以写在 chat 上面，也欢迎你们加我的微信，我的微信号就是 USC Maying USC MAYNG。现在请 Stephen 我们的招生顾问介绍今天的嘉宾，谢谢大家。 Stephen。
大家好，我是史蒂恩，我的英文名字是 Stephen Stump, and I'm an admission counselor here at the USC Leonard School of Gerontology. I can help answer any questions that you may have in regards to our programs, which one may be the best fit for you, our school, student life, living in Los Angeles, or our admission process, how to apply to the program to help you jumpstart your career. If you have any questions about which program is the best fit for you or how to apply to it, please feel free to email me. My email is stump, STUMPH, @usc.edu. And now I have the honor of introducing Dr. Deborah Ho, who is an instructional assistant professor of gerontology. She completed her PhD in gerontology from the University of Southern California, Leonard School of Gerontology in 2021. Dr. Ho has extensive experience working with older adults to navigate age-related changes and prepare for life transitions in the US, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Her dissertation research focused primarily on storytelling as a health communication tool among older adults. Dr. Ho is also certified as a guided autobiography instructor and pet loss and bereavement counselor. Her current research interest is health literacy, specifically in palliative care. Without further ado, Dr. Deborah Ho.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Thanks so much, May, and to our Beijing team for setting this up. I know Stephen Stump just introduced me, but oops, hang on, slight technical issue. But I wanted to expand a little bit about myself. To begin with, I am from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, so really not too far away from many of you over in East Asia. I was trained previously in mathematics at the University of Iowa, after which I completed my master's in digital storytelling at Ball State University. Came across this program in Hong Kong, the master's in Gerontology, and I was like, I really like working with older people, so why not explore this as an option? I spent 1 year in Hong Kong working on my master's degree, and while I was doing that, I volunteered at the only English-speaking care and attention home that I could find in Hong Kong. I made it work for me. I spent a year volunteering with a care and attention home. Absolutely loved my time spending, just sitting there, chatting and playing bingo with older adults. And that's when I decided, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, hence the PhD in gerontology. Now, while I am an academic, for the most part, I do have a normal life, and hence I have other loves in my life. These are some of my loves, storytelling, as Mrs. Stump mentioned earlier. I also love musical theatre. I love Liverpool Football Club. I'll be visiting Anfield shortly in May. And I also love dachshunds. The two on the right, Tiffany and Hui Xing, are my xiao bao bei, is what I like to call them. So let's get to the crux of today's topic, retirement. What is retirement? Now, generally speaking, when we talk about retirement, in the past, the very common definition is that of an individual, so any one person who is fully retired is someone who has left the workforce and is not working for any pay, so no money, right? But since then, thanks to the baby boomer generation, we no longer have a single phase of retirement. The entire concept of retirement has really, really grown and, kind of like just sprouted new kinds of definitions. Retirement is no longer the end of a career. It no longer means the end of a working life. And, I've known even a man who is 97 years old living in a retirement community here in East Los Angeles, where I used to live, who still maintains a small group of clients from when he owned a printing press company. So every now and then, even at 97, his old clients sent him an email and he just shoots out work orders and supplies them whatever they request. And he gets paid a nice little sum for pocket money. He is at 97 years old, turning 98. He walks without a walker. He walks without any kind of aid. He attended all my exercise classes, which were generally the more rigorous exercise classes, because I don't cheat and I don't allow them to cheat. He was just really, really diligent, a go-getter, and still so actively engaged in life. And that, to me, is what retirement should be all about. Shedding the time when you do what you have to do, and embracing the time when you get to do what you want to do in your own time, at your own pace, as and when you choose to do so. So given that, how did we get here? So I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are aware that we have experienced transitions in our economies. For the longest time, we were mostly an agrarian economy, meaning we started off with agriculture. That is how we lived, right? And then slowly but surely, we evolved into the industrialized economy. And that was when we began to see massive changes. Because suddenly you had smaller families, you worked for a wage, you weren't growing your own food, you weren't caring for your own livestock, so you weren't producing your own sustenance within your farms. And therefore, with also coupled with urbanization, when people were too, quote unquote, too old to continue working as laborers because they were older and physically less capable or physically weaker, then they would just quite simply run out of work. Okay, it was harder to find work, and therefore, without the ability to grow your own food, raise your own livestock, naturally you suffered because if you weren't working, there wasn't going to be an income, and therefore you would be less likely able to sustain not only yourself but also your family. Now you throw in what happened after that. After the industrialized age, we moved into the knowledge economy, and suddenly we weren't even doing anything physically. We were mostly focused on the knowledge. So the K economy is mostly a mental work, partly due to an increase in education, especially in developed countries, and so people's lifestyles began to change as well. And now we're moving into what is known as the human economy, where we focus on the creators, the empathizers. We're coupled with the emergence of artificial intelligence and whatnot, and soon we're probably going to see further evolution of what retirement is, and the big question: can we even retire? So why then is retirement preparedness so important? For the basic reason, we're living longer. Thanks to improved public health, be it nutrition, vaccines, better hygiene, etc. Healthcare is improved. All this has contributed not quite to living into older age, but to a reduction in child mortality rates, which means nowadays when we are born, or when a child is born, they are more than likely to live past the age of 5, which wasn't always true. Just over a century ago, a lot of children died before the age of 5. And with improved public health, as I mentioned earlier, we managed to reduce these child mortality rates. Just the fact that some social policies, such as gun laws and whatnot, have contributed to certain other declines in life expectancy, especially among middle-aged segments of the population in the US. So all these things have contributed to changes in life expectancy. All that said, though, for us, we're likely to live a very long life, whether we want to or not. At least 75, 80 years old, and probably older if we do all the right things. And therefore, it's important for us to consider the different things we need to consider, the different things we need to think about, the different things we need to prepare for in order to ensure that our retirement is one that is vibrant, that is, flourishing, instead of one that is of decline, that most people associate retirement with. Which brings me to my first 2 questions. This is an online poll. I cannot see most of your responses, but I'd like you to just ask yourself, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word retirement? And what do people talk about when they talk about retirement? So what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word retirement? And what do people talk about when they talk about retirement? So flood those chat boxes. If May or Stephen or anyone in the Beijing office is able to, please feel free to interrupt me and share some of the interesting responses that we might get. Okay, so moving along, the number 1 question Americans ask about retirement: is, how much do I need to retire? This is very common, naturally. Whenever most of us think about retirement, the first thing our thoughts go to is money. How much money do we need? Do we have enough money? How much more do we need? You know, what is cost of living going to be like in the future? And we try to, I like this, no need to work. Yes, ideally that would be true. No need to work. That would be retirement. Thank you, Lin Song. But the question is, not having to work is one thing. How do you fill that time, right? Because suddenly you've been working for 30, 40 years of your life, maybe even 50, 60 for some of us, possibly. And suddenly when you choose to retire, you don't have the same kind of things. Your routine changes, your identity changes. So many things can change when we retire. And yes, it is great to have a little bit of time to rest. But at the end of the day, yes, money is number one on many people's minds, because when you don't have to get into work, when you are resting, you're probably not earning money unless you are a savvy investor and have taken care or have done enough to prepare yourself for this vital phase of life, and something that we all should look forward to, really. Is money all that matters in retirement? Well, very tough question to answer. Yes, but it's also no. You know, it's not, it is important, but it is not all that matters. Yes, it is important because money gives us the tools or the access to things like the lifestyle we choose, the types of healthcare that we have access to, education that we can access, health promotion, meaning can you buy the types of food that you want to eat that is good for you? Can you indulge in hobbies that you want to pursue? Things like, I don't know, exercise classes, maybe going to the gym, maybe doing yoga. I know a lot of people in China who grow older love square dancing. You know, do you have access to all these things? Because while square dancing may be in a public place for the most part, you may not all live right where the group you want to participate with is, you know, is actually engaging in square dancing. So there are many, many things that you ought to think about. Money gives you access to some of these things, of course, but it isn't everything. And as gerontologists, we consider these approaches. Two main things any gerontologist that you talk to, or anyone trained as a gerontologist, will probably keep in mind. One is called the life course approach, and two is the biopsychosocial model. Okay, so life course approach and biopsychosocial model. What are these two things? First thing, life course approach. I think it's, to put it very, very simply, the life course approach just talks about how our lives, we don't grow old overnight. Okay. Our lives in older age is the sum of our entire lifespan. From the time we are conceived in our mother's womb to the time we die. That is the life course approach. We look at every stage of life, every single thing that happens, every barrier, every facilitator, every obstacle, every challenge that we go through in life. All these things are life events that help us to grow, help us to build what I like to call my toolkit of coping mechanisms, for example, to help us get through life. When we're older, basically, what happens when we're younger shapes a lot of what the outcomes in older age are. If when you were younger, you were very active, okay, you were very sporty, for example, and then in middle age, because you're so busy with work, you're so busy with caring for your family, for example, you stop exercising. Now, you're lucky if you're very active in younger age, because that will somewhat help you when you start to, you know, have other priorities in middle age. But when you pick it back up again, all these things, these little changes or these little things you do and don't do can result in your health and well-being outcomes later in life. So that's what the life course approach talks about, basically. Everything from the time you're conceived to the time you die. All these things are related, okay? The sum of experiences. Then we have the biopsychosocial model. So for the longest time, when we talked about retirement, we talk about health as well, right? Not just money, we talk about health. And when we talk about health, we usually mean physical health. But as gerontologists, we try to approach it more holistically. We look at the biological factors. We look at the psychological factors. We look at the social factors. Because I am not my brain or my heart or my friends. I am Deborah Ho. I am the sum of my parts. My brain is connected to my body, and my entire self, my individuality, my personhood is what we like to say. I am composed of not only this physical self, but also my social connections, also the way I think, also the things that I do or don't do to help maintain good health. All these things interact with each other. And therefore, for optimum health and or well-being, we need to look at ourselves from all these perspectives. Biological self, your psychological self, and your social self, okay? And that's the sweet spot that we all want, all right? And the thing about being human, though, the reason why this model is so critical when we work as gerontologists is mainly because you and I are very different. We are unique individuals. We may have been born on the same day. We may have lived in the same neighborhood. We may have gone to the same schools. We may be working the same job now. But at the end of the day, we are still individuals. And this is even true of identical twins. You know, despite sharing a lot of genetics, they are two individuals. Case in point, I have two twin cousins. They're both about, I think they're about 30 years old now. Yeah, because I'm getting old. So they're about 30 years old now. So when you look at them biologically or physically, they look like they're in good health. You know, they're very, very slim. They take good care of themselves. They groom themselves. It's obvious that they're educated because of the way they carry themselves and whatnot. But what do you know? They both are diabetics. And the only thing that is helping them control that is exercising, because all their lives, when they were younger, that is one thing they never did, okay? So sometimes physically you look at someone, they may look fine, but inside something else, because they didn't have those kinds of social interactions, perhaps. Their socialization was mostly in music class or, you know, doing something like reading and stuff like that. They weren't socializing in a physically active kind of way. Compared with my family, from the time I was very young, my father would always take my brothers and I to, you know, the badminton courts. We loved badminton. My father played hockey. My father played soccer or football. My father played all kinds of games. And he would take us with him everywhere he went, which meant we were also conditioned to indulge in physical activity from a very young age. And so even in older age, sometimes I slack a lot, not just a little bit, a lot. But at the same time, when I need to, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I just do it. But with my cousins, they had to actually start from scratch. So even though we lived on the same street, they grew up a little bit later than I did, obviously, because they're younger than I am. But you know, we were exposed to many similar things, but at the same time, that socialization, their family, what their family did together, probably attending more educational stuff compared with my family, attending to more like sports or social events that involved physical activity. These kinds of socialization can change the entire trajectory for each individual. And we're talking about even in the same household. My younger brother, compared with myself, he's younger than I am by about 3 years. Even though, technically we were raised in similar households, because one, he's 3 years younger than I am, so he grew up at a time that was where my family had a little bit more, for example, in terms of household income. My family had a little bit more money, so we could afford more things. He was able to do a lot more things, probably had a richer lifestyle, this boy. And so, in older age, he has his set of health problems that I don't have. And I have my set of health problems that he doesn't have. It's just fascinating how gerontology actually gives you a window into all of these differences in each individual's lives. But it's important to remember this biopsychosocial model as well as the life course approach, because it is important for us to recall or to bear in mind that no two people are ever alike. And as we grow older, if we have the good fortune of living a longer life, the older you become, the more heterogeneous that segment of the population becomes. Meaning the older you are, the more unique you become, because we are, one, by the life course approach, we are the sum of our life events, our life experiences, what we did and didn't do, our education, our exposure, our worldview. And we're also a sum of these things, our biopsychosocial model, what it is that we indulged in, what we didn't, who our friends are, whom we work with, how long we've been working. All these things contribute to your eventual health and well-being outcomes. So which brings me to our main question for the day. How should we prepare for retirement? Quite simply, 3 particular perspectives that I'd like to share with you today. Because I think financially, everybody knows what they have to do. And fortunately, having been raised in the Asian culture, saving money is already ingrained in our daily practice. So that part I'll leave to financial advisors. As a gerontologist, what I really focus on when I prepare people for retirement is these 3 perspectives stemming from the biopsychosocial model. The first is the biological perspective. So it's important to recognize that as we grow older, we will experience normative sensory changes, meaning it is natural to expect some changes in our sensory perception, meaning our sense of taste, smell, our touch, sense of touch, our vision, our hearing. We are bound to experience some sensory changes. They will all decline a little bit. But as individuals, I think the greatest lesson I learned in studying gerontology is that in order to take care of yourself, you need to know yourself. And so knowing yourself means observing yourself at all times. The simplest example I can think of is hearing. A lot of people say, oh, but hearing is so hard, to tell whether you're losing your hearing or not, because you always hear yourself, and if sometimes it's because the other people are mumbling, they're talking too softly. Yes and no. The simplest way to actually learn your hearing thresholds are because we are so used to using earphones, whether it's wired or wireless, right? And generally speaking, we all have a favorite song, if not 10 favorite songs. So what I like to do is, using as often as possible the same device, using the same song, I will often play that song on my device and try to use it at the lowest volume possible. And then I take a note. Is it level 2? Is it level 3? Should I be worried because suddenly I can only hear it at level 6? So these little things are important for you to observe about yourself. Because as soon as if today you are at a level 3 and suddenly next month you're at a level 8, something is not right. And that's when you need to go get a test. Changes in hearing to me is very, very important because it is an invisible handicap. It is an invisible impairment. And, compared with vision loss, when you're visually impaired, you either use glasses or you have a cane if it's bad enough. But with hearing, yes, you have hearing aids, but they're still not perfect. We still don't have the kind of technology that we need to really, really be able to use hearing aids perfectly, unlike vision. For the most part, you put on a pair of glasses and you can see pretty clearly. We don't have that kind of perfection when it comes to hearing aids. So for me, my hearing is very important. And the Mayo Clinic suggests having a baseline test. So going into the doctor, checking your hearing, seeing what that lowest threshold is before you turn 65, because that's when things really start to decline at more rapid rates. Sense of smell, taste, and touch also decline in sensitivity as we age. And while they seem like nothing, they are important because sense of taste, sense of smell can keep you safe in a sense that, if you're eating something bad or if you're smelling something that, if there's a gas leak or something like that, all these things can make a difference. So when it comes to aging and approaching retirement, make sure you know where you are at in terms of your sensory perception. Because once you have your baseline, you can observe and you can monitor for sharper changes that may be causes for concern. There are also normative cognitive changes. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I think these things sum it up. I hope you can see it. But it's generally, some things basically with cognition, some things remain good, some things improve a little bit, in fact. Other things actually decline or decrease in competency. Nothing wrong with that. I think the key is to understand what these changes are for you because we all change at different rates. Okay. So aside from normative cognitive changes, we will change in terms of our abilities. I think it's about accepting that as you grow older, certain things change, certain abilities change, and therefore you need to acknowledge that you've changed and try to do what you can to, safeguard yourself. Because once you have a serious fall, for example, that could lead to disability. And in some cases, like in my grandmother's case, she fractured her hip, she had a hip replacement, it was infected, and then shortly after she died. So these little changes, if you're not careful about, we can actually create these scenarios that are very, very negative for us. And finally, when it comes to this, chronic serious illness, there's certain things that we cannot run away from. I think if we just follow our doctor's prescription, if we take care of our, if we do the right things like try to exercise, we try to drink plenty of water, we eat the right things, healthy foods, lots of vegetables, lots of fruit, maybe less protein in some instances, hopefully we can manage these chronic or serious illnesses that we may get throughout our lifetimes. Most times though, just because you have a chronic illness, for example, like arthritis, very common among older adults, it doesn't mean it stops you from living. I have an 88-year-old friend. She's got arthritis in her joints, but every day she walks at least a mile, and she walks at a fairly quick pace in order to continue maintaining her health because she loves traveling and she travels to Europe every year. So she does this despite her chronic illness. So yes, there may be some disease and some decline, but it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. You just need to do the right thing to take care of yourself. Okay. Now, these are the more important things because I think health and all that everybody is aware of. Psychological perspective. Now, one of the biggest things when we retire is our identity changes overnight. Unfortunately, we haven't reached this phase. We haven't reached this time where we are able to gradually retire. Most of us don't have that luxury. If you do, kudos to you. But for the most part, when we retire, your identity changes. And there's a difference between men and women. For women, most times identity change doesn't matter because even within the house, we are constantly changing our identity. 1 minute you're the mother, next minute you're the wife, then you're the homemaker. You just change seamlessly and we're used to it. We're comfortable with it because it's in our nature. But for men, particularly older men today, I think with the younger men, maybe not so bad, unless you come from a very traditional household. Identity for men is mostly very, very strongly related to their work identity. And when you retire, the day you retire, you lose that work identity. Why is this so important? Why am I highlighting this? Because especially for those of us who have high positions, for example, or some kind of position of authority, my friend who was like deputy general manager of a bank, the day she decided to resign from her position, overnight her phone stopped ringing because she was no longer important anymore. Too often we forget when we have been in a particular position for a very long time, we forget that the position is not us. The position has its level of authority, its level of respect, but we enjoy the fruits of that title, of that identity. We never really become that identity because the day you retire, the day you leave, someone else takes over that role and they become that important person. You who retire overnight become nothing to everyone else. Unfortunately. Of course, nowadays we see some changes with certain people because of social media, so they're able to continue to engage with others. But that's good for them. For many of us, we may not have that kind of platform or that kind of visibility to even transition in that sense. So it's important that before you retire, you prepare yourself to assume a new identity, be it as a volunteer or finding a new job, or even playing a new role that you never could play as a working person within your own family. Okay? Then sense of purpose. Now, some of you said, retirement is a time of rest. It's a time of not needing to work. But if we don't have anything to wake up for, after a while, we may not wake up at all. Okay. So therefore, we must always ensure that we have a sense of purpose. From the time we are very young, sense of purpose is something that we always need to have in our life. Otherwise, there is no reason to live, essentially. And the sense of purpose, having sense of purpose versus not having sense of purpose, can impact also whether you do things like take care of your health. If you have no reason to wake up, then you're probably sleeping all day, which means you're probably not eating well, you're probably not doing exercise. After a while, you're going to waste away. So sense of purpose gives you reason to at least wake up. And then if you have sense of control, continued sense of control, that combined with sense of purpose can create health and well-being outcomes for the rest of your life, basically. In a sense that, and this is actually very strongly tied to health and wealth. When I say wealth, I don't mean super rich, just having enough money. Health and wealth give you this sense of control, because if you have money, you may not have the best health, but if you have money, you have healthcare, you have access to healthcare, you have access to caregivers, you can still get some people to do things for you, to help you to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. But if you don't have health, if you don't have wealth, then life is going to be very hard, because it's going to be very hard to get access to the things you need. And it's just really that much harder to get anything done for yourself, unfortunately. Very simple example, when I was living in a retirement community, it was very painfully obvious who had more money and who didn't have much money. Because for those who were unable to walk themselves, sitting in a wheelchair, for example, when it was time for dinner, those who had money would have a personal caregiver who would take them to the dining hall at 4:30 p.m. sharp every day, so that they were the first ones to go into the dining hall. But for those who didn't have enough money to have a personal caregiver, they had to wait their turn for the nurses to actually take them one by one to the dining hall. So if you're lucky, you would be first, but many people weren't as lucky, so they would be the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth, and so on and so forth. So health and wealth really help you preserve sense of control, but those are not the only ways, of course. Okay? And then finally, you have time, future time perspective. So how you think about the time you have left, whether it is positively or negatively, will strongly shape what you do or don't do in your retirement. If you think you have, even if it's 1 year or 2 years, if you think it is a time to learn new things, if you think it is a time where you get to try new adventures and eat new foods or pick up a new hobby, you're more likely to also do the things that will maintain your biological health in order to pursue the things you want to pursue. But if you have a very negative view of what the future holds, if all you're thinking about is, oh my gosh, I am 90 years old, I probably have 1 or 2 years left to live, I am in pain all day, I am, I don't have the strength to do things, I don't have the same level of energy, I'm just going to lie down all day, chances are you are going to really, really suffer as well. I have a friend in the retirement community who is 92 this year. When she turned 91 last year, she had a fall. Okay? She fell, she fractured her hip, and she had to go for surgery. Now, this friend of mine, every day without fail, the first thing she does when she wakes up is she jumps in the shower, and then she does a 15-minute exercise. Her exercise at 90 plus years old includes planks, exercise planks, includes push-ups and jumping jacks. I am 45. I don't do any of those because I cannot hold a plank long enough. I hate jumping jacks because I'm too heavy and it hurts my feet. And I've never been able to do a push-up. So at 91 years old, when she falls and fractures her hip, she goes to surgery, she gets into rehab. 3 months later, at 91 years old, she is walking again without a walker, without a wheelchair, without any aid at all. And all that has to do with the fact that she knows she wants to continue to engage in life. She wants to remain active in life. So she does these exercises every day, the 15 minutes, and then she attends the other exercise classes that the retirement community offers, because she knows by keeping her body healthy, keeping her body strong, she will be able to continue, God willing, to actually engage in her social activities, engage in whatever she wants to continue to pursue. So that is time perspective, how you think about your future time or how you don't think about your future time. Oops. Okay. So social perspective, finally. So time, relationships, very important. And why do I say it's important? Because too often when we retire, we think to ourselves, oh, I want to spend more time with my family. Hello, sorry, but your family has their own life. Your children, your grandchildren, all are very busy with their own activities. They will not have time for you. Even with your spouse, for 30, 40, 50 years, you've had very individual lives despite living together. Suddenly you are with your spouse 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Not going to happen. Something is going to erupt. So you've got to communicate with your spouse, with your family, and discuss how it is you might share your time with them and how they might share their time with you. Also, social network. The best thing about retirement, my favorite example is my parents. Both of them grew up with a lot of childhood friends. But when they started working, they had their own families. Everyone just never really kept in touch. But as soon as they retired, and this was the advantage of Malaysia having mandatory retirement age, so they all retired about the same age. A few years after that, every month or 2 months, the whole group from their childhood neighborhood would come together for dinner and just reminisce. They would chit-chat until like 6 a.m. in the morning when I'm fast asleep, and just talk about the good old days when they were kids and the things they did and the people and the places they went to. So it's important for you to keep your social network or to reconnect. And it's okay if you haven't been in touch with them for 30, 40 years. They were busy, you were busy. When you have time, perhaps it is a good time for you to reach out. And who knows, if they are in the right time and space, they will also connect with you. Then familial relationships, generally speaking, don't expect too much because we all have our own lives, right? So always by default, communicate what you want, what your expectations are, and maybe you can reach some kind of middle ground where both parties or all parties are able to actually come to an agreement. Okay, we'll have dinner together as a family once a week or once a month if everyone is living far away. If in different countries, let's connect over FaceTime or WeChat or something like that, at least once a week. Okay? But all it takes is a discussion, communication. And finally, for single parents, you also need to consider what you're going to do with your time. Becoming an empty nester, meaning your children all gone off to school and you're a single retiree, it can be very shocking to the system because suddenly you have so much time, so few people around you. It's maybe time for you to consider picking up a new hobby, making new friends. We have social groups that you can meet online and do things in your own city at an appointed time and place. So it's important for you to re-engage or reconnect with society, whether from your past, your present, or maybe from your future. But retirement isn't a smooth sailing thing, of course. As we grow older now, and with all the economic upheavals we've experienced in the last 10, 20 years especially, we're going to probably observe greater problems when it comes to longer term financial security. You throw in some negative health event and that demand is going to increase exponentially. So it's important to think about these things, and hopefully industries like, say, long-term insurance industries will mature. When more people buy into it, hopefully it will be cheaper. And then more people will have access to these types of longer term security. We also have to be prepared for technological advancement. Don't sit around and just say, I don't need to learn this, I don't need to use technology. I'm fine with whatever I have. My mother back home in Malaysia, nowadays, every time she goes into a new restaurant, her first question to the waiter or to the boss in the shop is, do you take cash? And that's because a lot of restaurants now especially are changing to digital payments. And because she refuses to learn how to use her phone, which I don't think is a problem in China. I hear that, you know, a lot of people have digital wallets, and even older adults are very comfortable with using them. But there are still people who may refuse to actually get on to participate in these changes. And so it's important for you, as you grow older, to also keep in touch with these changes, because these changes, you know, you never know when you might have to adopt something completely new that doesn't even exist today. You know, and that's one of the challenges we will experience or face. So we just have to be prepared for it and stop stop avoiding change, because we cannot run away. The only thing constant in life is change, right? Also, housing inventory and stock. This is primarily a US problem. Older adults are having a lot of problems with finding affordable homes, for example. In Los Angeles, rent prices have gone up exponentially in the last few years. So it's really causing some problems to certain segments of the population. Always just being aware of what's going on, the changes, and hence being able to prepare. So what? Why did I choose to talk about retirement? For one, because I want to grow older among people I love and enjoy. You know, I work so hard all my life. Hopefully one day I want to enjoy the fruits of my labor in what I call retirement. I also want to look good while doing it. That's Charles Eugster. He was 93 when he took this picture. He started exercising in his late 70s or 80s. He looked at himself in the mirror and he was like, I don't like what I see in the mirror. So he started doing strength exercises and was soon competing in senior competitions, including rowing and track and field. And that's him at age 93. You know, I also want to continue to indulge in activities that I love. Maybe not square dancing, but you know, I love dancing. I'd love to take lessons in ballroom dancing or Latin dancing, that kind of thing. And also, I want to have new adventures, perhaps even skydiving. You know, this is an 83-year-old woman who went skydiving, tandem skydiving, of course, on her birthday. So I want to be able to do all these things, and therefore I need to go back to the biopsychosocial model, look at it, study it, understand myself within that model, and then write prepared lists, you know, what I can do, what I cannot do, what I want to do, what I don't want to do, so that I will have a retirement that is flourishing, exciting, and just, you know, full of life and activity. So that, with that, thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions about either the school or about the programs, or even about today's presentation, this is a very watered down presentation because I have so little time, but I think I've exceeded my time talking. So sorry to the Beijing office and Stephen and May for talking too much. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really a splendid presentation and very informative too. I think it's all related to nowadays, all the people, someone who is in the age of is facing the retirement. And I think for us personally, when I listen in the presentation, it strongly reminded me of my parents because they are retired. And
Yes.
One time I asked my father about his feeling before he got retired, and he said, he feels he's useless to the society and like from now. And
Yeah.
before that I thought he maybe feel like release, like because working is hard, so I think he will be happy for retirement. But I found it plays a negative role in his self-esteem, and I thought maybe it's not a good thing for him. Yeah, so I think of course, yeah, I think our audience, just like me, can also remind their parents or their grandparents. So I think it's really a good informative presentation for us. Thank you for
Thank you
for sharing this. And I think, yeah, and also regarding the question, how audience think about remind of the think about the retirement when they hear about that. Yeah, someone said they can record no need to work, and also yeah, someone said rest and money. So I think if our audience truly feel emphasis, yes, sympathize to this presentation. And since we get some questions from our Zoom chat box and also our platforms, yeah, so I can start with the Zoom question first. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see it actually from Aurora, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I can address that. Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Aurora, thanks for the question. Certainly, that's a really, really great question. I've asked this question of myself so many times as well. Is it necessary to develop a university dedicated to older adults? I think China has one of the most, in terms of numbers of third age university, I think is what you call it in China. I think it has one of the most number of third age universities among all the in all of Asia, at least. I'm not sure if compared to the US, if it will match in terms of numbers, but certainly in Asia, during my studies, I learned it has one of the most saturated number of third age universities. The problem is not many people were going to them. And so because of that, your question becomes very, very relevant. Is it necessary to develop senior universities? I think if you ask me this question pre-pandemic, I would say it is helpful because you have a point, a focal point, a place where people can go to and whatnot. But now post-pandemic, the penetration rate for digital devices, everybody has a cell phone, even older adults. So I think yes, it would be good to have a senior university or an older adult university, but it doesn't have to be a physical university. So it doesn't have to be a traditional model of a university. It can be something very virtual where you take lessons online. And if you need extra help, then you have senior centers around the cities where you may be able to access additional help. There is a relatively new senior activity center in Los Angeles. It's called the Wallace Annenberg Gen Space. It's a wonderful space. It's very small, but it has certain activities that enable people who want social interaction in person to go to meet in. But there are also many programs online, things like Coursera or edX from the Ivy League universities on the East Coast. All these things as well. I know older adults actually participate online because they're free and it's things that they're interested in. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not necessarily formal in the way we understand education to be. It is more catering to what they want. No homework, no quizzes, nothing. But you learn something new, and at the same time, you get to engage with people. Some of them have also organized small groups within their localities. So those who live close to each other, they may actually organize small meetup groups. But it's a great thing to have a university that caters to older adults, but not necessarily a specific physical building, nor a specific university only for older adults. Because at the end of the day, using the social perspective, intergenerational relationships also prove very, very advantageous to health and well-being outcomes. So if they're able to attend local universities for a discounted rate or for free, why not use the existing resources instead of investing in new and limited resources, in limited assets, so to speak? Let's see, graduate students in our school have opportunity to join labs, work with, yes, people who are actually students at USC, especially School of Gerontology, because we're a lot smaller than many other schools, we have direct access to professors. So when students ask me about research experience or wanting to get research experience, I tell them, first I find out what it is that they're interested in, which area, and if there is a professor within the department who has those related research interests. Usually it's a cold email. The student is advised to try and set up an appointment with the professor, and then they meet, discuss expectations or needs, and then if it's a good fit, very often the students will participate in the lab research as a research assistant. Yeah. Thanks, Yuhan, for the question.
Thank you. And then I will over to the live streaming questions.
Okay, sure.
The first question is, I want to ask Professor, how do you think about the retirement model in China? In the population of aging people is huge in China.
Yeah.
So sometimes we more like to suggest to provide the care for the older peoples at home, and sometimes in few community it will provide some caring services, but it's not so mature now. So I would like to ask the Dr. Deborah about how do you think about this situation, these issues? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, I didn't get your name.
My name?
Yeah.
Ellie.
Ellie. Okay. Thank you, Ellie. Okay, so wonderful question. And honestly, the most frightening thing about retirement in China is that you retire too young. 60 for men, 55 for women in white-collar jobs, 50 for women in blue-collar jobs. That is way too young. I haven't even started life at that age. So that is a major concern. And especially with the pension model, right? If right now, China's life expectancy is about 76 years old. If you retire at 50, that's another 20 over years of, in a way, prime working age, prime working life, and you're still relatively strong and healthy and capable and all that jazz. So it's very concerning that China's retirement ages are so young, especially if you work in certain industries. I mean, if you're your own boss, then you can work until you die, as far as I know. So that's not a problem. But not everyone in China obviously is their own boss. So in terms of care, now this is very tricky, because we have several models of care in older age that organizations like the World Health Organization have proposed or have advocated for. Age-friendly communities, aging in place. All these things are not a bad thing. They're justifiable based on research that we have done about late life transitions, like moving to a new place when you're in older age. That can be very, very disruptive to the older person, depending on their personality, depending on their character, depending on their family support network, their social support network, and whatnot. So it can be a problem. Generally speaking, though, aging in place, my biggest problem with aging in place is that it's okay if you're aging in place in a place that was built for you to age in place. But most of us, when we talk about aging in place, we're talking about aging in the place where we have been living for the last 20, 30, 40 years. And these places may not have been modified to accommodate the changes that we experience, the normative sensory changes, the normative cognitive changes. And just physically, we become weaker and whatnot, and we become more vulnerable to things like falls and whatnot, because not everybody is like my younger brother. When my younger brother bought his house, what he did was he installed tiles that were non-slip throughout his entire house. So much so the contractor asked him, how many older people are living with him? And he said none. I mean, it's just him and his wife, and they were going to have kids, but his entire house has non-slip tiles. Okay, so that's very unusual. But he still doesn't have the grab bars and all that. Also, not all of us live in a place like Singapore, for example. as some of you may know, Singapore is about 70% public housing. And if you know anything about Singapore, public housing in Singapore is nothing like public housing in the US or many other developed countries. You want to live in Singapore public housing, you know? So in about, wow, it's 24 already. So about 15 years ago, when I first studied their model, one of the things that they were doing was actually conducting research on which housing estates, which public housing estates were growing older the fastest. And they found that a lot of the East Coast public housing estates were the oldest and fastest aging populations. When they realized that Singapore invested money to reach out to their population to actually provide free upgrades to their public housing. They installed free grab bars. They were willing to install free ramps for those who may need, who have like mobility vehicles to enter, or wheelchairs, or even walkers, right? Because with a walker as well, sometimes their legs are not strong enough to go up steps. So they installed all these things within the apartment. And if you accepted only the basic upgrades, all these upgrades were free, which in my mind is crazy. If you wanted additional upgrades, they charged the residents cost price to include those upgrades. Now, the old public housing estates also had elevators that were like in between floors. So you either when you get out of the elevator, you either walk up one flight of stairs or you walk down one flight of stairs to your apartment. Today, I think I dare say all public housing estates in Singapore have been upgraded so that the elevator stops at every floor. It might give you some money here and there, you know, now and then, but at the end of the day, they won't be stepping in to help you be responsible for your care and whatnot, especially as you grow older. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's not. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Because of the limited time, from now I will pick maybe 3 more questions from student
and I will try to be concise.
Yeah, and the next question is, how do Dr. Deborah, do you think about the future development trend in terms of the retirement, and will there be big differences between the East and the West? Thank you.
Wow, this is a really, really great question. I can't predict the future naturally, but assuming you are younger than I am, I think it will probably be very different for you than it is for me as well. And it is also going to be very different for whoever is older now. It's really all about a timing thing. Retiring now versus retiring 10 years from now, or retiring 20 years from now, they're all going to be different, unfortunately. So it's really hard to really answer this question without asking you, what do you mean by future? You know, are you meaning the short term, the medium term, or the longer term? Because they're all going to look very different. And it's also going to look different for people who retire, say, in a recession versus people who retire during an economic boom and whatnot. Nowadays, there is, what's happening around the world as well is impacting us. Even though we may not be directly at war, for example, certain events globally can impact things like supply chain, So all these things contribute to how we actually experience retirement. And yes, there's always going to be a difference between the East and West, in part because of our different cultures. The question is, how long can things like filial piety, for example, survive? I think for the younger generation, that's going to look very different than for my generation or the older generation, I mean, especially if you are the only child in the family and you have to care for, 2 parents, 4 grandparents. How is that going to work? It's going to be very, very tough.
Yes.
Very
Thank
hard
you.
question.
Thank you very much. And I think, yeah, just you mentioned about the only child and they should raise the two parents.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for your
Yeah.
talk. Yeah. Sorry
Sorry.
to interrupt because it passed
No.
our scheduled time.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, May and Stephen.
But thank you so much. I think all the audience and will learn a lot from you. Yeah.
But
You go
and they
ahead.
have my email. So if they
Yeah.
have further questions, you can feel free to email me the questions as well, Ellie, from the other platforms. I'd be happy to answer. This is my life. I enjoy it and I love doing it. So
Thank you so much. It was a really wonderful presentation and speech. Yeah, and thanks for all your time and understanding for this time. And maybe for the last part of our session, yes. Do you have any last suggestion or advice to our potential students who are interested in our gerontology school? Thank you.
Potential students. The thing I love about gerontology is how much it taught me about myself. And when I learned more about myself, it made it easier to care for the people I love and care for. So, it's a great subject because it prepares you not only for your future, but for everyone else's future. And there's no better preparation than a course in gerontology at the USC Leonard Davis School of Gerontology. Because we're family, yay!
Fight on.
Yay!
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all your effort, support, and help for this wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. And also,
My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for our audience to join this event until the end. Yeah, thank you so much.